Hello, and welcome to Engage with Eagle Forum, a podcast to encourage the modern day woman in her vital role in shaping society. I'm your host, Tabitha Walter, the political director of Eagle Forum, and I'm also joined by our executive director, Kirsten Hassler. I am so excited about today's episode because we are covering a topic that harkens back to the foundation of Eagle Forum, feminism as it relates to motherhood. If you don't know how Eagle Forum began, go back to season 1 and check out the episodes at the very beginning. So in a nutshell, Eagle Forum was founded by Phyllis Schlafly in 1972 to fight against the feminist Equal Rights Amendment, a constitutional amendment that would actually strip away women's rights instead of giving them all of the so-called equality that feminists messaged on. Phyllis rallied countless moms, many who were stay-at-home moms, to take action, and boy, did they ever. The ERA was defeated and still remains defeated to this day. Even though Phyllis has passed on, we still fight against the far left feminist agenda. It's hard in today's culture to cut through the noise and find out the truth or even speak the truth that goes against the popular feminist rhetoric.
So that's why we've brought on Carrie Gress to give us a fresh perspective and some words of wisdom. Carrie Gress is a fellow at the Washington, D.C. based think tank, Ethics and Public Policy Center, and a scholar for the Institute for Human Ecology at Catholic University of America. She has a doctorate in philosophy from the Catholic University of America and is the editor at the online women's magazine Theology of Home and has written for numerous publications. Carrie has lived and worked professionally in Washington, D.C. and Rome, Italy, and her work has been translated into 9 languages. She's the author of several amazing books. Be sure to go and check her out at carriegress.com. Welcome to the podcast, Carrie. We're so thankful to have you on.
Thanks so much for having me. It's really fun to join you today.
Yeah, so you're clearly an excellent writer. If all of these publications have picked you up. So what exactly made you passionate about writing and why on the topic of feminism?
I think that's a great question. My doctorate is in philosophy. And actually, when I was working on it, I said, probably even out loud, I never want to work on women's issues. And, of course, God has a great sense of humor. But I think that one of the things that I really realized that I didn't like about the way academics talk about women is it's incredibly inaccessible for just most women to really know what's really being talked about. There's usually so much philosophical jargon. There's usually a lot of just shorthand and language that takes years really to sort of start parsing it out and really understand what people mean by certain words. And so I just was really, I just didn't find it engaging or compelling. I just didn't think that these were the ways to reach women in a fun and way that just speaks to the heart of women. And so I think that's really what I stumbled upon. I wrote a first book called Ultimate Makeover about women. And it was really mainly about my own experience as a mom. And I just finished my PhD and it's in 5 languages, it's 30,000 words, half of them are footnotes. And so it was just fun to write something really simple and basic and straightforward. And so that's when I just started kind of diving into this idea of women. And, one of the things that I discovered mainly, as a mom was I constantly was living with this idea that, motherhood was going to get easier. And as soon as I realized that, it's almost by design that it's not easy, then it got a lot easier. Then when I realized that what it was doing was making me more virtuous. It was making me more patient. It was making me more compassionate. All of these kinds of things were happening to me as a mom because of the demands of motherhood. And then it was really easy to see sort of how that happens on a larger scale. But from there, it just kind of kept growing. I just kept seeing how awkwardly and almost top heavily we speak about women in the culture today, especially on the conservative side of things. And I don't want to give that to friends and relatives who maybe don't understand political issues or religious issues. I wanted something that felt more accessible, and that's kind of really where what has drawn me into it. And of course, the main book that I've written on the topic is called The Anti-Mary Exposed, Rescuing the Culture from Toxic Femininity. And that book has really been probably the main book that really dove into the issues And I wanted women to know kind of what we've been told, back from 1972 up till now, that the message hasn't really changed and we haven't pushed back on it enough. And so that's been a fun thing, is how do we push back on this in ways that really, resonates with women, instead of it makes them feel alienated or kind of out of their league intellectually, or just doesn't appeal to them at all. So that was really where it all started.
So I guess in that vein, can you describe feminism as you have observed it?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the things that's been so interesting to me, to look at the philosophical roots of it and sort of pick out, this is an effort that has said over and over and over and over again that it's really there to help women, and yet it's so tightly wrapped into these two different ideological threads, that these are things that simply cannot help women. The first one, of course, is Marxism. And, we see roots of that as Kate Millett is someone that I talk a lot about in my books. Her sister, Mallory Millett, has been a great help to me. Kate passed away. Mallory survived, and she feels this endless guilt about what her sister did to the culture. And she's the one that wrote the book called Sexual Politics, and really was kind of undergirded a lot of women's studies programs. She was on the front cover of Time magazine. And yet all of her emphasis was really on, how do we get Marxism built into the American woman's psyche? How do we help women not see themselves at all really as mothers? And actually, she spoke very plainly about women having the courage to have abortions and kill their own children, and just really incredibly awful stuff when you see it, laid out in front of you that way. And so the Marxist piece is one that's there, where it is this effort to really erase any distinctions and differences between men and women, and just kind of see us as cogs in a machine, as robots. And obviously that includes the absence of bearing children, or only bearing them out of necessity, and certainly bearing female children above male children. So anyway, that's one of the elements. The other element that's really alive and well, that I don't think gets enough attention, is the occult element, and how much paganism has played into this. We know Wicca or witchcraft now has more adherents than there are people that claim to be Presbyterians. So that's on the uptick as well. And I think that the two go hand in hand, because if you don't have a Judeo-Christian perspective, paganism is always going to seep its way into a culture. And this is just what we see throughout history. And that's really what's happened, is that women feel out of control of their lives. And this sort of feels, the occult feels like kind of a desperate way to regain that sense of control. And so that's definitely another pattern. So I thought, and you can see that actually I just wrote an article about this pop artist named Halsey, who just came out with this 13-minute video. There's hardly any sound in it. It's just her walking around the Met, dressed very scantily as a pregnant woman, looking at all these images of the Virgin Mary. And then she goes to another room and unveils a picture, and sure enough, it's her in a pose like the Virgin Mary, slightly more provocatively. But that image is going to be the cover of her new album that comes out in August. So there's this effort to sort of go back to mythology, to sort of usurp these icons of womanhood, and use them in really distorted ways. Madonna's done it, Lady Gaga, Rihanna, Beyonce, on and on. They've all used this kind of occult imagery, and I think we kind of overlook it as just maybe pop sensation. But when you see enough of it, it really starts raising questions of, what is it that they're trying to get at with all this messaging?
Right. Yeah, that's really interesting. You wrote an excellent article in the Federalist titled "Meet the Flyover Women Pop Culture Ignores." And you talk about how moms across America are happy living with the everyday challenge of raising children. And I want to read a portion of that because it just struck me, and it really pinged my heart. You said, "What we will never see in the splashy pages of Vanity Fair, for instance, are the many happy women who buck the feminist narrative, loving, nurturing, consoling, clothing, cleaning, and adoring their numerous children without trying to live like men. From Maine to Hawaii, these are women who have opened themselves up to the dramatic and self-sacrificial love required when one person truly loves another. They carry children in their wombs, their arms, their hearts, their minds. They know the preciousness of tender embrace from small arms, a little face learning to offer kisses, the peppering of questions from a curious child, and the dig deep challenges of teenagers, sometimes all in the same hour. Some know the struggle of children with broken bodies or broken minds or both, and some know the gaping hole that will never be filled when a child or children are lost.
Yeah, I'm getting teared up because I'm thinking of all the women that I thought of that when I was writing this article, and just their witness and the things that they've been through, and the way that they have persevered. And I think these are the things that are just clearly not going to be covered in mainstream media. And this is one of the arguments I make fully in my book, is just pointing out how much the culture really is controlled by this radical feminist agenda, whether it's fashion, Hollywood, politics, book publishing, public policy. All of this is really controlled by one narrative. And that is that women have to be more like men, instead of really understanding what it means to be a woman. And so it's been a great thing to be able to look at what does it really mean to be a woman, and how do we start reclaiming some of these aspects of womanhood, in a beautiful way, instead of constantly, this knee-jerk reaction, like, oh, if men can do it, then we can do it. Instead we need to look at what are these things that women have. And one of the things that I found that's, older than the hills is this idea of women carrying things. That the word for ocean in French is a she. Vessels like a ship are always named after a she, or after a woman there, because they understood this connection between, what women do. Even looking down at our bodies, we can see we have wombs, we have a pelvis to accommodate them. We have, even our arms are bent different than a man's arms, so that we can cradle a baby without, getting tendonitis. So it's that beautiful aspect of how we can carry on a physical level, but that also points to what happens on an interior level, and how we carry people in our hearts and in our prayers. We're dialed into them. We know what they need, and we try and accommodate that, and not just abide with people, but actually improve them, and help make their lives better, and get them to be the people that God meant them to be, through all of these things, these small little bits of service that we do here and there, or even big things too, like childbirth, to help bring others into the world and improve their lives.
Yeah, Kirsten and I are completely in the throes of young motherhood right now. I have a toddler and a newborn, and Kirsten also has a toddler, and she'll have a newborn soon. And we also know the pains of loss at the same time. And so, I think a lot of times culture tells us something different about what we should be doing right now. Big part of DC culture, which we're right in here in this area, is that you work all the time. You work long hours, you give yourself over to your job, you're married to your job, and they put career as your number one priority over family. And so I'd like you to expound on this ideology a little more. Why do you feel like feminism discourages family life in this way?
Yeah. No, I think that's a great question, but I think it's really reducible to one thing, and it comes back to power, and this idea that we can live as autonomous individuals, that we don't need anybody else, that we can't, we don't need a husband, we don't need children, we don't need family, extended family, and whatnot. It's this idea that we can sort of control our own destiny by doing what we want to with our ambition and our hard work and the hours that we put in and whatnot. And that's the saddest thing, because this is really what they pinpointed about men that they thought was important back in the 60s and 70s, that, here men leave the home and they go out and have this great time doing, fulfilling their dreams and ambitions. And they don't seem to be saddled by, the things that children bring to our lives. And so rather than saying, these are differences, they said, this is what we want. And sadly too, in addition to that, it was the case that it wasn't good men that they were after. They were trying to emulate. It was actually bad men. And this is why abortion has become such a lightning rod in our own culture, because the fact that you can't their belief, and the lie that we hear over and over again, is that you can't be happy as children are an obstacle to that happiness, and husbands are can be an obstacle to that happiness, unless of course they're somehow on board with your career and whatnot. So I think that that's really the saddest lie that we have been fed over and over again. And this is why we have to have abortion, why it's been raised to the sacramental level among the left, in terms of just, we saw what happened with Justice Kavanaugh, all the screeching and all of these things that go on whenever that's threatened. And this is the reason behind it, because they really have this idea of lifestyle and power and autonomy that drives everything. And it's at the expense of these close, tight personal relationships and service and giving of oneself, and finding ourselves through gift of self too. I think that's another piece that's really foreign to the current culture as well.
So, I mean, what is your advice that in terms of, number one, how we can fight against this narrative? And then once we do that, how can we as women find a support system to not be pressured back into that?
Yeah. No, I think those are incredibly hard things. In fact, I don't have great answers for either of those questions, because I feel like there's only because I haven't been able to sort of create a network for women doing that. And I think that was one of the things that I had in mind with this article with the Federalist, of this idea of flyover women, is to try and help women recognize that they're not alone. And, I've had emails of people have sent me and said, we're for flyover women. We'd love for you to come give us a retreat or talk to us, or, help us out with such and such thing. So it's interesting to see that this name is people are attracted to it because they feel it resonates with something that they experience in their own life. So I think that that's something that I would love to do further. And I hope to actually get a book out on it eventually. But I think that this is even in our own areas, we can find other women who are like-minded. But even Instagram is a great place. I've been amazed at the amount of support that's there. In fact, there was one woman yesterday, she had just posted about reading my book and how she had gone to Columbia, and she'd been told over and over again, you shouldn't stay home with your kids, and it's a waste of your education. You took a place of somebody else that could have taken your plate. All of this kinds of nonsense that we hear over and over again. And then she finally read my book, and it completely freed her up to feel like she didn't have to listen to all of that. And it was wonderful, and yet so sad to me. Like, why is it that she's this far along in her life and she hasn't heard this from anybody? And I think that there's so many young women like that they just need to hear it from one person, and then it completely resonates with them, and they understand that there's more than what they've been told, that they can go deeper. And I think it's important too to even just recognize there are these different seasons of life. I had 7 years where I was just completely at home. I did nothing in the public eye. I was busy finishing up a PhD and just having children. And I never would have dreamed that I would be doing all the things that I'm doing now. But that's where my education came from. I came from. I knew I had to finish my PhD, and at some point it would probably be used. And I think that that's the exciting thing, is these things are never wasted, but they kind of come back around, and they can be used in different ways as well. So kind of giving into that sense of, well, I'm going to stay at home and have children, or have multiple children, I think, and that your life is over, I think is really short-sighted and really not a great understanding of what womanhood is, because we do have all of these different seasons and ways in which our gifts can be used. And that's, I'm a stay-at-home mom generally, and everything else that I do just sort of fits in around that. I have a 17-month-old myself, and you both know how much work toddlers still are. So yeah, it's definitely a balancing act.
Yeah, absolutely. I find so often that comparison is the thief of joy. And it's hard as a mom not to look around you and wonder what life would be if you would have put your career first. And maybe you're thinking, wow, I could have traveled more, or I would have more money and a bigger home, or, all the things that we may see around us, or even on TV. Or even have enough money for someone to clean your home instead of you doing it all the time. That would be so nice.
Right.
What would you say to those moms who are in this stage of life?
Yeah. No, I think that that's a great point, and such an easy thing because of Instagram, because everything always looks so tidy and lovely. And I know one of my greatest escapes was just thumbing through a magazine. And I had 4 under 5 at one point, and just to even have 10 minutes, just flip through a magazine. But, in that, then you can really get caught up in the comparison. And so I think that that's the fundamental thing is, take that energy that you're spending on comparison and look at your children, look at what's happening in their life. Maybe it's because I didn't have a child, and then we had this surprise child when I was 46. And I just marvel, like, here's this little packet of a person who's just amazing. And, look at his toes and his teeth that are coming in, and, all these details that it's just amazing to see how God works in these little miracles. And I think that that's something that can become very humdrum, especially when you are deep, deep, deep in that trench. But to think about the potential that's put into this child, and that you have the capacity to draw out of them. I think that kind of flips it more back onto how can I be proactive instead of just sitting here feeling passively and feeling like a victim. Instead of thinking, I've been given a great responsibility to make this person, help them to be the person that God intended them to be, and help them change the world in very small and or maybe large ways too.
As a mother, or even as a grandma, an aunt, or really anyone who has some sort of influence on young women, how do we teach that as an alternative to the feminism that we are taught in our schools and in college classes, in books, literally everywhere?
Yeah.
And then how do we apply that then, or help them apply that into their decisions that they want to make for their future career or for their family, all of that stuff?
I think that's really where it's there are cultural pieces that can help us, whether it's women that we know or that we admire, whether it's movies. Old movies have some really amazing, elegant women with a lot of incredible virtues. Books, of course, are another great piece of this, because what's happened is we're sort of in the sludge right now, and it's hard for us to see it around us because, like you said, it's so oppressive. But if you can sort of be elevated out of that somehow, either whether it's books or a movie or a person that you admire, and it doesn't even have to be every aspect of this person that you admire, but maybe certain elements that you think, I want to be like that woman. I really like that she has this capacity. Someone like Mary Ellen Bork. Mary Ellen Bork, if you know her, is just an incredible woman of grace that I've spent a lot of time just admiring because she's just a lovely woman. And, I would love to have some of her gifts and talents and graces. And yet I know that if I listen to the culture, I will not cultivate them, because the culture, of course, encourages us to be angry and emotional and outspoken about everything that comes to our mind. A lot of things which we probably ought not to say. And Mary Ellen, for me, embodies that woman who is very tactful and knows what to say, when to say it. And I think this is one of this great virtue of meekness, that we think of meekness as a doormat. And, when it's really, meekness is really embodied in a person. That means they're the ones that have the control over what they say and do in their life. And a lot of us just haven't ever cultivated that or thought of it because the culture hasn't encouraged that. So I think it's just a matter of really finding the women that you're drawn to, and sort of asking the question, what is it that I like about this woman? What virtue does she have that I can emulate? And kind of picking and choosing from different women in your life, and or in stories or elsewhere.
Yeah, it might require a little bit of effort, but
but it's out there.
And it's so much easier to just emulate the people that are on, like you've talked about Instagram, all the celebrities that are on there, or seen in the magazines, but maybe the virtuous woman, we need to search a little bit deeper for her.
Something a little bit more soulful, for sure.
Yeah, that's so good. We had a guest on last season, and he had just had a daughter, and he was putting up pictures in her room of women in the neighborhood that he wanted her to look up to. And that takes a lot of research and time, but it's so worth it, because it can really change the trajectory of your life. And in doing that makes you more prepared for life, and more fulfilling and happier. So it's worth it.
And I think that's been the amazing thing, is just how sad and unhappy radical feminism has made women. And that's the piece that we don't get. We get a lot of makeup and fake eyelashes and things that make women appear to be incredibly happy. And yet when you look at the numbers of the happiness metrics, as I call them, we've got some really unhappy women. We've got a lot of us are a lot more medicated. And that may be part of what keeps up the appearance. And yet there's, suicide rates, divorce rates, substance abuse, all of these things really point to some very unhappy women in the culture.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I know my family, my husband and I have just been trying to find ways to just reduce the stress level in our household.
Yeah.
It's so easy to get wrapped up in the everyday aspects of life and forget to just enjoy the little things, like, the joy that our 3-year-old brings us when he wants to color, just trying to reformat and reframe our mindset as we go forward.
And I think that that's really wise, no matter where you're at or what stage of life you're at, because it is easy to miss those things and not really be present in the moment. And just sort of wonder where the time has gone. So I think that's just a vital thing, those kind of mental snapshots that you can just take in and really meditate on.
Yeah.
Well, that's the joy of motherhood, is that you can have your bad moments with your children where things just seem chaotic, and then a few minutes later they're the biggest joy in your life, and you can be so proud and so happy with what they're doing and their development. And so it can be whiplash sometimes, but like at the end of the day, I'm just so happy to be a mom and have that opportunity, and not have to worry about all the feminist rhetoric, because I'm right there in the moment with my own kids.
Right. No, I think that's well said. And that's been one of the things that I've loved about being a mom too, is that no matter what the cancel culture does, my book got canceled by Facebook and Instagram Marketplace earlier this year. No matter what these things are, my kids still love me, and I'm still their mom, and those things don't change. People aren't allowed to buy my book.
Yeah. Well, that's so beautiful. And Carrie, this has been an awesome conversation. You've made us laugh and you've made us cry. Which doesn't, I don't think we've cried on a whole lot of podcasts. So that's a point in your book. But I will be posting a lot of your writings throughout the week for social media, for those who follow us on our platforms. I actually have 2 of your books, 2 from the series of Theology of the Home, and they are beautiful inside and out. The writing is beautiful. Guys, please get these books, because you could even put them on your table for guests to read, because they're that beautiful. So grab one of those on Amazon. We'll put links to her books there. Are they still on Amazon, or did they get canceled?
Yeah, no, Amazon's okay. We had a glitch there too, but it's been worked out since. So
okay,
yeah.
Good.
No, thank you.
Yeah. Well, thanks again, Carrie. And if you are listening to our podcast, be sure to subscribe, share with your friends, and leave us a review. You can find us on all of the major social media outlets and at engagewitheagleforum.com. From your house to the State House to the White House, this is Engage with Eagle Forum.